Welcome to the Small Giants Fishbowl. This topic is the power of beliefs in business. Join Ari as he shares his learnings from his new book, A Lapsed Anarchist's Approach to the Power of Beliefs in Business, and provide you with a guide to help you reflect critically on your organization's beliefs. Okay, here we go.
As I was working on the book, I realized that really, although there's been any number of theories about customer service, servant leadership, open book management, luck, mine and Paul's personalities, the town we're in, et cetera, that one area that people really had not talked about, and to be honest, I had not thought about, was our beliefs. And so for me, the last three and a half years or so of working on this book has been highly educational. It sounds odd to say, but it's a subject that somebody's having a good time.
I've never seen you.
Okay, I'm going to assume you're all still there. It's a belief. Working on the book has been something that I really never spent much time thinking about, which I know sounds a little odd, but although obviously intellectually I knew that beliefs were out there and an important subject, it's just something that I really never gave a whole lot of thought to, what I believed about beliefs and their role in the workplace. So that's really what the next hour is about, is just sharing some of those key learnings. To be clear up front, I'm not talking, when I say beliefs in today's context, I'm not talking really about religion, sports, or politics, although all three of those are, of course, beliefs, but they're not really what I want to focus on today. What I want to focus on here is the impact that what we believe, each of us as individuals and the people that we work with or that we're related to or that we share time with in our lives, how much impact what we believe is having on what we're doing. So with all of that in mind, I'm hoping that you all have the workbook that Julie and Hamza sent out. If you do, on page 2 are just a little Zingerman's logos of what we have going on. I don't want to do Zingerman's history, but if you're curious, because I know a lot of you, we did open the Korean restaurant 2 months ago in Carytown. It's called Miss Kim, and it's going great. And you can look it up and make yourself hungry by going to misskimanarbor.com. What I want to do in a moment, though, is have you look at page 3, which is essentially blank. I've never tried doing an exercise in a webinar, but I believe it could work. So what I want you to do, and I'm going to time you, is for the next couple of minutes, I want you to write down everything you believe about your business. So what I've learned from doing this, and I'll tell you to start in a second, what I've learned from doing this is the faster you write and the less you stop to think, the more effective the exercise is. For those of you who've done the visioning, it's basically like the hot pen work that we do with the visioning process that we teach here. So we're not going to collect them. Hamza's not going to review them, but just what do you believe about your own business? And your page will be quickly filled with I believe, and you can list as many as you would like. Mara's going to help me time it. I can't see you all, but I'm assuming that you're diligently writing away and not checking your email. Okay, if you're in a good flow, you're welcome to keep writing while I start talking. If you're paused, that's great too. If we were in the room together, what I would do, just so you know, is to have you pair up with somebody and sort of share some of what you came up with, because it's always interesting to learn from others. Many of you do know each other, so I'm going to suggest later today or next week or over the weekend or some point, it wouldn't be a bad idea to sort of connect directly without me and everybody else in the room and just sort of share what you came up with. But what I want to have you do now is, if you would be kind enough, is to flip to the next page, which has the belief cycle at the top of the page. It's page 4 in your workbook. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how I got going on this subject that I had somehow paid no attention to up until 3 or 4 years ago. So the story is one that goes back a little before that, actually. We had a quality issue here in our organization. I'm sure many of you have had one in yours. And we did, we employed a tactic that we've put into place many times over the years as we've gotten bigger. This was a quality issue that was impacting not every one of our businesses, but most of them. And it was something that no one person or no one business within our organization could solve on its own. So we put together a work group, which we typically do in order to deal with these things. And we did all the stuff that I know how to do that would normally make for a successful work group, which would have eliminated the quality problem. We put a diverse selection of people onto the work group. We had a nice selection of people's seniorities, some people who'd been here for 8, 9, 10 years or more, a couple that were newer. We had some managing partners, so this is people who literally had equity. We had people who were working with the product itself, so they had quality product expertise, all the stuff that we would normally do. And then we did what most of you on this call know we do, which is the group wrote a vision for what success would look like. So by my standards, all the pieces were in place to make something good happen and get this problem worked out. And yet they really made no headway, which of course, as you can imagine, led me to become ever more frustrated. And I tried all the things I knew how to do, pep talks, challenging them creatively, et cetera, and really nothing worked. Around the time that my frustration was starting to peak, I just happened to be reading Bob and Judith Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T, their book, Transformed. And in their book, I discovered this cycle, which is at the top of page 4, in which I think hopefully you can see up on the wall, thanks to Mara's nice artwork behind me. So Bob, I've known for many years. It's a long story about my family, but anyways, he wrote the foreword for part 3 of the book. He's quite an interesting and insightful guy. So this cycle blew me away. I called him to ask where he learned it. He can't remember where he learned it, but I give him credit since I learned it from him. Basically, it's a self-fulfilling belief cycle, and it works sort of like this. I'm going to endeavor to stand up here. Mara, can you tell me if they're going to be able to make this work? Can they see? Mm-hmm. I'd ask you all if you can see, but I can't hear you. So at the top, we all have beliefs. So this is something that I'm leaning on the light switch. This is, I believe it got darker in here. This is something that, of course, in hindsight is super obvious, but every action that you and I take as human beings is based on what we believe. So again, I'm not talking in a moment about religion, politics, and sports, the most commonly discussed beliefs. I'm talking about beliefs about people, beliefs about the role of business, beliefs about quality, beliefs about what a good cup of coffee or a candy bar should cost, beliefs about our significant others, beliefs about our coworkers, our partners, etc. So based on those beliefs, we take action. The fact that you're on this webinar today in the Fishbowl is pretty clearly, well, I'm going to guess it's based on, I'm going to believe that it's based on the belief you're going to learn something, although I guess it could be based on the belief that it gets you out of your regular work for an hour. But I'm going to choose to believe that it's because you want to learn something. Based on your actions, the people around you start to form beliefs about their work, about you, about the organization. And based on that, they take action. And it turns out, blew my mind, about 90, 95% of the time, their action just reinforces our original beliefs. So this is sort of a textbook example of how this could go in an organization. Again, if we were in the room together, I would make this more interactive and pause to let you tell me the answers so you can sort of imagine that in your mind as we do this. But probably no one on this call would fit into this category, but we all know out in the business world, there's a lot of CEOs or presidents or owners of companies who don't really believe that training is a great, worthwhile investment. So based on that belief, I would ask you what action they would take. And of course, the action they would take is they would do almost no training. If they did do training, it would probably be some government mandated training or something that world headquarters dictated that they needed to do, but it'd be very minimal. based on the fact that there was no training, the people in the business would start to form beliefs about the future, about how the company felt about them, about their growth and opportunity potential, et cetera. Pretty clearly, if every group I've ever asked this says the same thing, what beliefs would these people form, the employees, and the beliefs they would form pretty surely would be they don't have a lot of future, the company doesn't really believe in them, et cetera, et cetera. Based on those beliefs, they in turn will obviously take action when they come to work. The straightforward question is, what kind of work will they do based on those beliefs? And the obvious answer is they're going to do the minimum to get by, because they're diverting a lot of energy into thinking about what other jobs they could get or what else they could do in their life that would be more rewarding, which of course just reinforces the CEO's original belief that training was a waste of time and money, because they just say, look how bad these employees are. Thank God we didn't waste any money on training them. Interestingly, if you flip the CEO's belief around and you take the more positive belief, and you have a CEO like all of you and like me and Paul and everybody here who believes training is a great idea, what action do they take? Well, as you already know, we do tons of training. I'm guessing you do too. Many of you have your staff on the call today with you, exemplifying this very issue. When we invest a lot of time, money, and energy into training, the people in our organization start to form different beliefs about their job, about the future, about what could happen. And what are those beliefs? Of course, that they have a future, that there's opportunity, that the organization believes in them. And then, of course, when they start doing good work based on those beliefs, you and I go, man, this training's fabulous, let's do even more. Ironically, it's exactly the same employee populace in both scenarios. All that really changed is the belief set of the leader. And this blew my mind when I took this reality of how what we believe leads to action, which leads others to form beliefs, which leads them to take action, which almost always reinforces our original belief. And I juxtaposed this cycle with what was going on with this work group that just wouldn't get going. I realized the obvious. They didn't really believe in the work, and they didn't really believe in each other. And consequently, when you don't really believe the work is worth doing, the quality of effort you put in is minimal. Others in the work group start to believe it's not going to work too. They start to do minimal work, and you go, see, I knew this was a waste of time. And although everybody was all for quality, they weren't ready to do the work, not believing in the work group and not believing that it was really their personal responsibility. It was, of course, someone else's responsibility to fix it. So I hope this is making sense. If we were in the room, I would pause for questions. Hamza, is that something we can do for a second?
Sure. Yep. And people can type in their questions. They can chat it in, and we'll just ask on their behalf.
Or you could think it really hard, and I might get it.
Hi, Ari. So Hi. Do you feel like, I don't remember, is this an important difference or not? Yep. Did they not believe that it was worthwhile, or did they not believe that it was possible? Or like, is there a difference in terms of?
Well, and I'm sure there's some difference, but in this case, I think it's basically the same outcome. Sometimes the question is, what's the belief? You need to know. If you really get into the details, you might want to know what the belief is or why they don't believe it's a good use of time. But in practice, in the simplified model, it's the same result, which is that they do a minimal amount of work. I just had never really thought about it. I did all the stuff that I knew how to do: reward the group, create a vision, get a good work group together. They weren't outwardly opposed to it. It's just, it's become quite clear to me the obvious, which is when people don't believe in something, they never give 100%. This is true in school. Everybody on this call had a class they hated or didn't like or thought was a waste of time. And we did enough to get by and keep our parents off our back and not flunk out, but we never aced that class. We all have, Sam Keen Ken, whose books I love and who I love personally, says we always make time for what we really want to do. And I guess that's what we believe is going to be rewarding and productive for us, whether that's intellectual or otherwise. It's what's going to happen. So one little thing, a couple little things to add to this mix. Thank you, Brad, for mixing it up. I get bored of hearing my own voice. It's less effective, but I hope your lunch is going well. We like when people are eating. But anyways, I started to look at beliefs as the root system of our lives. As all of you know, we work with food, so I tend to think frequently in agricultural metaphors, and it sort of was an obvious one. What you and I as consumers or passersby see in a field is always 100% correlated to what the root system is below the surface. So I started to think about beliefs in the same way. What people who work with us, our friends, our family, our colleagues, all have beliefs about everything in their lives. We proceed apace without thinking about them for the most part, but what we believe is leading directly to the action that comes up above ground. I also started to think about organizational culture, which everybody on this webinar has thought a lot about over the years, as the soil in which the root system is growing. And I started to think about new ideas and new people as new seeds. Everybody in agriculture will tell you that if you plant the same seed, you can go out and buy great organic heirloom seeds, but if you plant them in pesticide-laden soil, they're not going to do very well. So the quality of the soil, the depth and health of the root system, and the quality of the seed become really important in our organizational ecosystem. One other little thing to point out about the belief cycle is that between your beliefs and your action right around here, can they see that? Right around there, there's a filter. And it's a filter that filters out all of the information that does not support what we already believe. And it allows in all of the information that fits what we do believe. This is why hardly anyone ever changes their mind based on data, because we dismiss the data that doesn't fit with what we believe to be true already. I taught this 10 days ago in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I don't know if anybody on the call is from Pittsburgh, but so this would be January 6th or 7th. I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, generally a rather cold climate. It was 55 degrees out, and there was about 200 people in the room, and it gave me a perfect example to say, based on this statement that I'm making, if some of you today are thinking, oh my God, this global warming's horrible, we're really in big trouble on the planet. And another part of the room is thinking, this isn't global warming. I remember my grandfather telling me back in 1931, it was 62. This is just the way the weather works. And what I know from what my studies of beliefs is that the people who believe in global warming will find reinforcement for their belief, and the people in the room that believe it's a hoax will continue to believe it's a hoax. And that pretty much guaranteed, none of you will change your mind today based on the fact that it's 55 degrees in the first week of January in central Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania. So anyways, this is really what all of this came from. William James, well-known father of modern psychology, said belief creates the actual fact. Belief creates the actual fact. And this really is the cornerstone, the foundation, the root system of what this whole 600-page book developed from. The more mindful we are of our beliefs, which is that exercise that I just had you play around with a minute ago, the easier it is to manage our lives. We'll talk more about this as we move through the session. In training, Maggie from Zing Train, who many of you know, she talks about stages of learning a skill. And one of those stages is what trainers would call unconscious competence. That's where you could, as Maggie always says, you can do it in your sleep. You don't really need to think about it. You just roll into it. Driving would be a good one. Sending an email now these days would become one, although it wasn't 20 years ago. Riding a bike, whatever it might be. What I started to realize is that most of us are so well versed in our own belief system, we can do them in our sleep. We're unconsciously competent. We just basically get on this cycle and proceed apace. We're frequently frustrated with the outcomes that we get from other people. But what this cycle taught me was to stop focusing on what other people were doing and start focusing first on my own beliefs, because more often than not, it was my own belief that was leading to a big part of the problem. In terms of unconscious competence, Carl Jung, who all of you will have heard of, the psychologist, said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so what I would suggest is that most of us have this cycle playing out in our lives, whether it's with relationships at home, with our relationships at work, with our business, with the marketplace, and that when we change our beliefs, the whole cycle starts to change. I'm hoping this is making some sense and resonating with you all. I'm going to move on to how beliefs are formed. So, Hamza, can we?
We have a couple of questions for you.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's pause for a question before I do that.
Yeah.
Are there particular techniques or series of questions that you've used to tease out your team's beliefs?
Yeah, so good question. I'm assuming you all could hear Julia read it. So the exercise that you just went through is actually a very effective one. It's based on, as many of you know, I like to connect things that are not normally connected. So it's based on the 1951 CBS radio show, which some of you might remember. This, I believe, Edward R. Murrow, which then came out in NPR, put out a series of books in the 2000s, and it's combined with the hot pen work that we do in our visioning exercise. So my experience is that most people, as per Jung's quote, are so unconsciously enacting their beliefs that they don't even know that they're happening. Just the act of writing them down starts to make you more mindful of it. And as we're going to do in a minute, you can do that exercise with anything. The faster people write, the less time they have to overthink it, just like with the vision. If they overthink it, they're going to tell you what they believe they should believe. We're going to get in a minute to another way to tell that apart. You got one more?
How have you incorporated beliefs into your business planning process?
Into our business what process?
Planning.
I thought you said planting, because with the root system. So the, you know, it's still relatively new to us. It's been about 1.5 years maybe. I think, I'm tempted to make Mara answer, but this will make her nervous. But anyway, I think that without question, it's already, you can just nod. I think that it's already had a pretty significant impact just by teaching this cycle and just by talking about it. I would say it's now pretty common conversation within the culture of the organization within 1 year of doing this. More formally, we're working now on a Zingerman statement of beliefs, which will come into play. Hopefully we'll finish in the next 6 months. So we're actually documenting our beliefs. We already have our guiding principles or values in writing. That's a common question which somebody's going to ask. I'll anticipate it, which is, what's the difference between values and beliefs? I mean, all of this, of course, is in the book in more depth than I'm going to give you today. But the quick answer is that all values or ethics are also beliefs, but not all beliefs are ethics, right? So our ethics or our guiding principles or our values, these are things that I would suggest, are inherent to how we want to be in the world, and they're not really something I would suggest that people would want to change. Your beliefs about human dignity, human rights, those sorts of things. But we also have other beliefs, beliefs about what's appropriate attire to wear to work, beliefs about what coming on time means, beliefs about grades in school, beliefs about what good food means, beliefs about what a family is, or what a good relationship is, or what a good parent or a good child is. And those beliefs may oftentimes not be ethically based. We just have them, and the cycle's playing out all day long based on those beliefs. I'm going to move into where beliefs come from, because that's a lot of it. So if again we were in the room together, I'd ask you all and have you call it out. But the key of this piece is just what I guess is sort of obvious to me in hindsight, but I had never thought about before. Beliefs are not genetic. No one is born with beliefs. Your hair color, your eye color, your height, your skin tone, all of those things may be genetically passed on, but what you believe or I believe has nothing to do with our genetics. It's all learned. So where do we learn it? We learn it, as many of you will have already started to figure out, from people we trust. Who do we trust when we're young? Our parents. There's a good quote in the book from Osho, the Indian philosopher and mystic, who basically says everybody knows their parents are wrong, but they don't know at the time that they're learning from them. So I don't believe our parents set out to mess us up, but they have beliefs that they gleaned from their parents, who gleaned it from their parents, and we just sort of pass those beliefs on all the time. One of the great food stories of this, which I did not make up, is the guy who's doing sort of culinary anthropology, goes to a woman's house who wants to learn their family recipe for pot roast that they make at the holidays, and she goes through the whole thing and says, she goes, "Not at the end, we always cut off this half-inch slice. It's a very important part of the recipe." So he goes, "Well, why do you do that?" She goes, "Well, I don't really know. My mother did it." So then he tracks down the mother, and he goes to her, and she goes through the whole thing, explanation at the end. You always cut off a half-inch slice from the end of the roast. She goes, "Well, why do you do that? It's so curious. I'm really interested. I'm an anthropologist. This is a very interesting story." And she goes, "Well, I don't really know. My mother did it." So he finds the grandmother, who's quite elderly, and he tracks her down, and he goes to her, and she goes through the recipe, and he goes, "So why do you cut off this half-inch slice?" He goes, "Well, the roast from the butcher wouldn't fit in my pan." Exactly, Julie. What I would suggest is that this is going on in all of our lives. We have beliefs that we don't even know exist. We just assume that it's for a very important reason. That's kind of a silly story, but many times this goes to social interaction, human interaction, beliefs about work, etc. What we believe drastically alters our experience of the situation. I'll tell one quick story, and then we'll move on to the next page. So many of you know I had a corgi for many years named Jelly Bean, who I used to run with all the time, and she died in May of 2015. She was 17. In fact, I'll throw it out there right now. We do a fundraiser in her honor for Safe House Center in Ann Arbor, which is a shelter for women and children from abused homes. But we do the fundraiser in her honor. Anyways, a year ago, November, was my birthday. And Tammy, my girlfriend, very nicely and discreetly, secretly actually, got us a new corgi puppy for my birthday, who we named Bean Sprout from Jelly Bean. And Sprout is a very nice puppy. So anyways, Sprouts, corgis are quite intelligent. She's very cute, et cetera, et cetera. But this weird thing starts to happen, which is when Tammy or when Tammy takes the broom out of the closet to start sweeping, Sprout would just go ballistic. So, being me, I tried logic, Sprout is just a broom, which of course didn't work very well. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, it's a broom. She's sweeping the floor, and the dog is just barking and barking like it's this massive attack. And because I was kind of working on this belief stuff, it dawned on me that although to you and I, it's really obvious that it's a broom and Tammy's sweeping the floor, to a corgi puppy who's highly loyal to their owner and whose innate job is to defend the owner, it looks very much like the broom's got a hold of Tammy and won't let go. No matter how she moves her arms, the broom continues to cling to her. And it's got this weird bristly stuff at the end. And your job as a loyal corgi puppy is defend your owner at all costs. So as long as that broom's holding on to Tammy, Sprout's going crazy. Again, this is going on in our lives all day long. I've tried to show the belief cycle to Sprout, but that hasn't really worked. But nevertheless, it's pretty interesting. So I hope this is resonating and making sense. We learn our beliefs from people we trust, our parents, teachers, mentors, our best friends on the playground, a minister. It could also be a movie star, an athletic hero. It could also be, for me and many of you on the call, could be a lot from books. I would imagine Bo's work around Small Giants, by definition, changed a lot of people's beliefs about business. So beliefs are being impacted all the time. The news media, of course, is impacting our beliefs. I won't make a joke about alternative facts, but that little piece up on the cycle, if you dismiss information based on what you believe, what you start to see is what's happening in the world, which is people see the same reality but interpret it in 180-degree opposite ways. So with that in mind, let's just move on to page 5, which is about alignment. So this is just, I want to do a quick piece on this. Here's the reality. If what we do in our lives, in our businesses, is not well aligned, and you can see all the components listed on the page 5 in your workbook, trouble's going to come. If we were in the room, I would ask you what happens, who's driven their car when it's out of alignment, and all of you would raise your hand based on my experience of teaching this. And then I would ask you what happens when your car is out of alignment, and all of you know. It's harder to drive. There's more wear and tear on the tires. Your gas mileage goes down. And then I would ask you what happens if you stop paying close attention and holding tight to the wheel, and all of you would sort of chuckle and go, you veer off course, and a few of you would say you have an accident. And I think that's exactly what happens in this context of our organizations. If what we believe is not aligned with our vision or our values, we will continue to go off course. It doesn't mean you can't operate to some degree of effectiveness, but you'll continue to pull in the direction of your beliefs. Why? Because all of the actions that we take are based on what we believe. Frequently, we write a vision or we write our values based on what we believe we should believe. Anybody on this webinar, which is probably all of us, the older you are, the more you know you've done it. When we've gone along with things that we didn't really believe were right for us, but we did it because our parents wanted it, because society wanted it, etc., we will continue to slowly but surely behave in a way that's aligned with our beliefs, not with what we truly believe, not with what we tell everybody we believe. This is when you stayed in school to make your parents happy. This is when you took an assignment to make your boss happy. This is when you started to lose weight because the doctor told you you needed to. I don't mean they're bad things, but our beliefs are not truly aligned with where we're going, and it will continually pull us off course. So this is where awareness of the beliefs, the earlier question about how we're integrating it into our planning, somehow it's important through that exercise, through dialogue and conversation, through increased awareness, is to make sure that we're really aligned with what we're envisioning. So you think, well, how could you be out of alignment? So a very simple example that I talk about in the book, in the food industry, which is what I'm very familiar with, is many people in our end of the food business have a shared vision of, you know, really helping people eat better food and putting this amazing food out in these farm to table restaurants and really focusing on handmade local ingredients. And that was very inspirational. It's certainly something that resonates with us. What I've realized over the last couple of years is that they also have a belief about food, which is that good food should be really inexpensive. The problem is, if you actually pay people and you're trying to pay them a little better than average, and you're paying benefits and health care for them, et cetera, there's no way that an heirloom tomato organically grown is going to be really cheap. Why? Because you're paying people. How could food be really cheap? You grow it yourself. So what's happening is that their vision is out of alignment with their beliefs. If you follow the cycle, if you have the belief that good food should be really, really cheap, what action will you take? If you own a restaurant, almost always you will underprice on your menu. And you can follow the cycle, it's going to end up in disaster. It looks like you're getting a lot of questions up there, so I'm going to pause.
All right, thank you for noticing. Okay, so first question, how do your beliefs and actions actually influence others' beliefs, if beliefs are truly ingrained in others?
No, they're not ingrained, they're learned. So beliefs are learned. So here, really simple. Let's say that you two, I'm looking at Hamza and Julia, let's say that Hamza thinks, I don't think this is true, but let's say Hamza believes that you're, you know, very, I don't know, stuck up and distant and hard to work with. So how would she, based on that belief, when she sees you come, and it's so hard because you're so personable, so it was probably a bad example, but we'll continue with this. So if Hamza believes that you're stuck up and very standoffish, when she sees you coming or she's in a meeting with you, how would she act?
Probably off-put.
She'd be off-put and she would kind of keep her distance because she's afraid that you're going to, you know, be rude to her or treat her badly. So when she keeps her distance, what do you start to believe about her?
Hamza doesn't like me.
That she doesn't like you. And then how do you start to act when you deal with her?
Well, I think I would confront her maybe, but
Okay.
I would avoid her.
So a lot of people would, at least in the beginning, would avoid her,
Yeah.
or not make eye contact, or sort of keep their distance. And she goes, see, I knew that she was stuck up. Look at how she won't even look me in the eye. And I mean, this may sound silly and it's hard to imagine because you guys are so nice, but the reality is this is going on in all of our organizations all the time, right? And then it could go on for years. So it's not that it's not genetically ingrained, it's learned. And because people don't even realize, so if Hamza says, I'm going to change my belief, I'm just going to believe that Julie is nervous and uncomfortable and shy, which would actually be true about me if I'm put into a group situation, right? So if she changes her belief to say that you're nervous, anxious, and shy and uncomfortable or uncertain about yourself, or have low self-confidence, but she really likes you. So what action would she take then? She comes in the room with this new belief. What will she do?
And, you know, make me feel more welcome.
Right. And then what do you start to believe about her?
That she's really welcoming and wonderful.
She's generous, welcoming, and super nice. And then you might start to open up and she goes, see, I knew she wasn't as mean as people said she was. And again, this is going on. So it seems like a low grade thing, but this tension is playing out all day long. You know, similarly, like with training. So if you have a manager in your organization who doesn't really believe training is a great idea, but you tell them that they should send the employee to training, what messages will they send when they instruct the employee to go to training? If they don't really believe the training is a good idea, but their boss told them that they had to send you, now they call you in the office to say, I'm sending you to this training. What would their energy be like?
Pretty low.
Pretty low, which then sets your beliefs that the training's probably not going to be very good. And then when you get to the training, you're not really paying attention. You're looking for trouble. Then you tell the boss how bad it was, and they go, see, I knew training was a bad idea. So this is playing out all day long. It's playing out in sales. If we ask our staff to sell something they don't really believe in, their energy will be low. The sales will be bad, and everybody else say, see, I knew it wasn't going to work. I hope that helps.
Sure.
You got another one?
Yes. How did you integrate this material into the organization, and how did it take, how long did it take to go from the consumption of the material to the adoption of the material?
Well, it's I think the same question as before. Basically, it's still happening. We always say here it takes about 3 years roughly for cultural change to take place. So we're about halfway into that cultural change. I think it's actually taking well. Why? Because we have a healthy organization that believes in training and believes in new learning all the time. So people take to it fairly quickly. but it's being incorporated into a lot of our internal classes. It's in the Zing Train seminars. The book is out. It's certainly not perfect, but it's had a big impact already, I know, on my life and on a lot of people's personal lives, just aside from work. One more quick one.
Sure. So how do beliefs change? How does an Obama voter become a Trump voter?
They don't. That's the problem. And that's why the political system doesn't work very well. So how do beliefs change is a good question. Let's turn to the next page while I answer your question. So how do beliefs change? Here's what I do know. Trying to make somebody change their beliefs almost never works. Telling someone their beliefs are wrong only makes the root system grow deeper because they become more determined based on the cycle to hold on to what they already believe. What makes us change beliefs? Well, new information might make us change our beliefs. Information presented from a new source that we already trusted. So if you like each other and Julia says to Hamza, you know, I really been thinking about this and they have a good relationship, she might listen to it when it's presented in a healthy way. Frequently, a real experience that is out of alignment with our previous beliefs will jar us. It happens far less than people might like, but you know, two quick stories and then we'll move on because you're asking about voting. So, you know, one is, I mean, racism is a belief. Bias is a belief. So we all know the stories of the people who, you know, grew up in a racist family. I've met many who will talk about their grandparents where they grew up in a racist family, and clearly my friend is not racist. I'm like, what happened? And they're like, my mother went away to college. What happens? Well, when you're surrounded by people who share all of your beliefs, why would you change your beliefs? There's no input that's giving you different information. All of a sudden you go to college and you realize that what you assume to be reality is not reality. So I think that's really the main thing. There's a recipe in the book that can help be followed by those of us like me or many of you now who realize that we have a belief that we want to change, because it's not as simple as after 30, 40, 50 years of holding a belief. It's not just you flipped a switch and now you have the new belief, because neuroplasticity, you've been thinking this way for most of your life. But beliefs change. I mean, in 1927 is the first time Native Americans were allowed to vote. 65 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. If women were married in the United States and up until the 20s or 30s, they were not allowed to teach school. So, I mean, things that we assume now to be normal were once considered completely the opposite. So the recipe in here will help people who want to change their beliefs. The other story I was going to tell is just a woman who came to the very first time I taught this at Zing Train, like 18 months ago, who through email, emailed me a week or two later to tell me how much impact it had. And of course, I continued the conversation. And basically, long story short, I said, well, what happened? And she said, well, my daughter's in high school. In our family, we believe that grades are really important. And I said, well, what's up? She goes, well, every day I pick up my daughter from high school and she's not doing very well. And within 5 to 10 minutes, we're enmeshed in this massive argument. And so I said, well, what happened? And she goes, well, after the talk about beliefs, I realized that I needed to change my belief. So what did you change it to? And she said, well, I changed it to be that my belief is that my relationship with my daughter is more important than grades, which still makes me cry 18 months later. And I said, well, what happened? She goes, within 2 days, the fight stopped, because I realized that I'm going to be in a relationship with my daughter, hopefully for many decades to come. And that me arguing with her about grades at 15 is not going to significantly improve her grades, and that the long-term outcome was more important than the short-term. Small Giants is all about a different set of beliefs about how business success can be attained and what it looks like. I came into my first job in restaurants 39 years ago with very negative beliefs about business. Everybody in my family were academics, physicians, etc. Paul changed my beliefs to be that business is just a tool. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's what you do with it. So he changed my beliefs in a heartbeat because he felt very strongly in his passion and deeply rooted belief about business being the tool that you could use for good quickly changed mine. So that's how they change. So if we had more time, I'd have you do the exercise on page 6, another version of this, I believe, and I'm going to suggest you all do it later, about an issue that you're having, a problem that you're having. The woman that I just shared the story had it about fighting with her daughter, could be at work, could be not at work, but do another 2 or 3 minutes if you want to really give yourself a break, to list out what you believe about the issue at hand based on all of what we've already talked about. I pretty much guarantee it's going to give you some new insight and information. Page 7, this is the last big piece of what we're going to go over in the session today. So with all of this in mind, I started to break out beliefs into the 3 categories that you could see on page 7. It's not rocket science. I like it kind of simple at this level. Are you looking at me or some other thing? Okay, yeah, my belief is that I might be doing something wrong, so I'm checking. So there's 3 categories of beliefs. You can see them on the page: negative beliefs, neutral beliefs, and positive beliefs. This is, for me, one of the biggest takeaways of the whole learning, and obviously there's a lot more in a 600-page book than this, but here's the reality. Negative beliefs create negative outcomes. Negative beliefs create negative outcomes. Neutral beliefs don't do much. Positive beliefs create positive outcomes. If you have negative beliefs about a coworker, it will create a negative outcome. If you have negative beliefs about a product you're selling, it won't sell. If you have negative beliefs about a project like our work group that you've been assigned to, it will not work. If you have negative beliefs about men, women, children, Black people, Jewish people, Polish people, Asian people, anything, if you have a negative belief, it will lead to negative outcomes. My favorite quote in the whole book, and those of you who've read other things I've written know I like quotes. My favorite one in the whole book is from Alexander Berkman, the early 20th century anarchist, who once upon a time wrote, "You can't grow a rose from a cactus seed." You can't get positive outcomes from negative beliefs. Now, you can make action from negative beliefs. You can have riots, lynchings, get somebody fired, get divorced, get a company to come down, overthrow a government. So you can create a lot of action out of negative beliefs, but you cannot create the kind of meaningful, positive, lasting, sustainable, healthy organization that everybody on this webinar wants to create out of negative beliefs. There's a whole essay in the book, which we're not going to get into today, about then with that realization, I was like, well, then I guess if we want a positive, healthy organization, we better base it on positive beliefs, because negative beliefs are going to lead us to a bad outcome. So it's really about how do you lead with positive beliefs. There's a whole essay in the book. Again, sexism, anti-Semitism, racism, these are all just negative beliefs. No one is born a racist. It's learned in the community, it's learned in the family, it's learned in the culture. Those beliefs can change, but telling somebody to stop doing it rarely works. Y'all can answer this quickly in your head, but if beliefs are the root system and a negative belief is a weed, if you clip a weed at the surface line, what will happen? It's going to grow back. This is why we can get people to stop saying the things they're not supposed to say. But the behavior is there under the surface, under pressure. We all revert to what we know best. The root system, if you have 30 years or 40 years or 50 or 60 years of believing something, the root system is very deep. It will not come out overnight in a heartbeat. So this is really the core of this work. I believe that everybody is a creative, intelligent human being that wants to do the right thing. One of my favorite quotes in the book is from Isaac Asimov. I'll read that and then pause for a couple minutes of questions. and then we'll move towards wrapping up. So Isaac Asimov was a very well-known science fiction writer. I don't know if anybody else on the webinar has read his stuff. I read it when I was a teenager. My grades weren't that bad. Not great, but not bad. Isaac Asimov, many of the science fiction writers, it turns out now, having studied them a little bit in recent years, were actually very radical thinkers, but they were allowed to get away with their radical thoughts by making their, in quotes, reality be on another planet or 2,000 years in the future. No one argued with what they were writing about. But he said in his biography, it said, "To me, it seems important to believe people to be good, even if they tend to be bad, because your own joy and happiness in life is increased that way. And the pleasures of the belief outweigh the occasional disappointments. To be a cynic about people works just the other way around and makes you incapable of enjoying the good things." So this is just one example, but this is going on all day long. You know, we're all out on the road driving, somebody cuts us off. Happens to everybody. If you have negative beliefs, you blare on the horn, you start swearing, you make up a story about how bad drivers people are, blah, blah, blah. But really what happens? You've just ruined your own day. You've increased the odds of yourself having an accident. You've raised your blood pressure, and you've created a lot of negativity, which, by the way, many people carry that negative belief so far that when they arrive at their destination, they spend the first 5 minutes talking about how bad drivers are, which increases the negative energy within their new space. But the reality is we don't know about the person who cut us off, and this is not a joke. They could easily be on the way to the emergency room because their significant other had a horrible accident, and they got that call that none of us want to get, that they need to get to the hospital, and they cut you off en route. So this is really where beliefs are changing in a really subtle way. It's making a huge difference in people's lives. So I'm going to pause for questions.
Okay, so this is from Kevin, and I might have to defer to him to explain a little bit more in depth if it's not clear. But so he asks, where are the light bulb moments in the cycle, i.e. where beliefs can be changed? And he quotes he's experienced this himself.
He quotes his experience?
No, he says he's experienced this himself. So I guess he's asking, like, within the cycle, where are the parts that someone's beliefs can be changed? Where are these light bulb moments?
Well, I think it could change for any of us anywhere. Sometimes it's not a big deal. Mara was nice enough to go get one of these new peanut butter crushed candy bars that we make. So I just was in Indiana teaching this to like 200 people to cook medical on what's today, Friday, on Wednesday. And so part of what I realized in doing the work on the book is that market leaders, which many of you in the room are, market leaders in their field, great companies or nonprofits for that matter, change the beliefs of their customers about the product or service that they sell. Market leaders change the beliefs of about the products or service they sell. So pick your company. If they're really an innovator, they have altered the beliefs of the consumer about what's right about that market. So I brought the candy bar because here's the reality. I don't even really like candy because I'm a savory eater, not a sweet eater. But the thing with these candy bars that are all handmade, Mara, can you help me out with that one? So that, with new food labeling safety laws, it makes it impossible to open anything. But anyway, even Mara can't do it. Okay, so anyways, I don't even really like sweets, but the reality is that these candy bars made by hand with really great ingredients are like so good that it makes even me want to eat them. And I started to realize because we give them out in a lot of our seminars, that it's actually changing the beliefs of people about what a good candy bar is, right? So if you eat this, here, I'll push it through the screen. Oh, it's right here. Okay, I'm pushing it through the screen. So take a bite. Like if you were eating this right now, I'm going to tell you that the odds are really high that it would change your beliefs about candy bars, because going back to the commercial industrial model, which everybody grew up with and thought was fine, it significantly alters your beliefs. I mean, I grew up with, you know, as most of you know already, Kraft macaroni and cheese, Mrs. Paul's fish sticks, Twinkies, Tang. So I didn't have any particular beliefs about food at all. It's only from exposure to different circumstances, different experiences can switch our beliefs. And then sometimes your beliefs don't work. So I started to look at that cycle like a roundabout, right? We get in it and we just keep driving around in a circle, getting mad that we're not making any progress. So when you get mad enough, you realize you might want to get out of the roundabout and get the cycle to change. So really it could be anything. I think learning is an important tool, and everybody on this webinar has changed beliefs about business. If they were to think back over the last 10, 20 years, it's a very good exercise. It's one that we do with employees sometimes in conversations, just talk about how your beliefs about business or food or people have changed since you've been working.
Okay, well that's it for this one. Check out more Fishbowls exclusively for the Small Giants community at smallgiants.org.